So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our fall Zoomcast series, and it sure feels like fall today. I woke up this morning and my little thermometer said -2 degrees. Jordan said the same thing on his car when he was on his way to the gym. So, it's certainly fall. The colors here in Huntsville are absolutely magnificent, and looks like it's going to be a great long weekend ahead. Exciting day, exciting times just before we start today's official agenda. Of course, very exciting times. We've got the Blue Jays winning last night and the Leafs winning last night. So I think it's things to come. It's good things to come in our sports world. So on behalf of all of us at the Benefits Trust, we'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you. Joining us today from the Benefits Trust, Jordan Bullhose is in the house, as well as Rob Crowder is going to be running things behind the scene. And if you have any questions throughout the day today, put up your little hand emoji. And oh, Carrie Lane's here as well. Carrie Lane just jumped in. There's Carrie Lane from the Benefits Trust. And if you've got a question throughout the day, put up your little hand emoji so it pops up on my screen and I can get to you, or put it in the chat box and everybody can see. And more importantly, Rob and Jordan and Carrie will answer your questions and everybody can see the answer as well. Um, One of the things that we do in this industry is, like, in my opinion, more than any other industry that I've seen, is we share information. And we share information all the time. And that's what these Zoomcasts are all about. It's about sharing information. And, it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being in a room where everybody gets smarter. And when we look at, people in the room here with just an absolute ton of experience, we can all add to this and we can all add to this message because I was attending a marketing session yesterday with a gentleman out of the United States called Joe. His name is Joe Polish, and he's quite a marketing guy, and he's an expert in marketing. And one of the quotes that he said is, Ideas without execution are worthless." And that sort of resonated with me. It's ideas without execution are worthless. And when we sit here for the next hour and hear what the comments are and hear what I'm saying and look at the slides and so on, if you get one idea out of this and something that you can use in your practice in some way, shape, or form, it's time well spent, and that's really the idea of it. For participating today, we're going to send you a CE credit. Mike Ignatz will send that to you very shortly. I believe it comes from what's the email that it comes from, guys? It's
Comes from learning at thebenefitstrust.com.
Yeah, so when you see an email from learningfromthebenefitstrust.com, you will receive a CE credit, as well as that real short survey, and you're going to be signed up for our newsletter. So that's what is going to happen at the end of the session today. So let me share my screen here. We're going to talk today about travel insurance. Uh, I know a lot of people like to travel, including me, and travel insurance is a really important part of that. So it's important that we talk about travel insurance. So get the most out of group travel insurance, tips and tools for advisors. That's really what our show is going to be about today. Our Zoomcast is going to be about today. And let's get started with this because we only have an hour together. Well, it's interesting. The travel insurance is, I think, a huge opportunity. When we were putting these slides together and talking about this presentation, it became really clear to me, or more clear, that when we're talking about travel insurance, I think there's an enormous opportunity. I think there's an enormous opportunity for advisors. As our block of business continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we've got more travel claims in our block of business, I'm hearing different things from different advisors as well as different employees of companies, and as well as from different plan administrators about travel insurance. And I think there's an opportunity for you or for us as professional advisors that we can add a great deal of value. We can add an incredible amount of value, and we can really separate ourselves from what others are doing. Travel insurance is an often undervalued benefit that's frequently overlooked by advisors, plan sponsors, and plan members, and significant issues can arise for all parties, including you, when we're not aware, when all parties aren't aware of the intricacies of travel insurance. So that's really what the theme of today's session is to talk about travel insurance, but really look at this through a lens of opportunity. I think there's an incredible opportunity for you as an advisor to stand out in your marketplace, especially against other advisors that aren't doing anything about it, that aren't talking about it. One thing that I know for sure is the majority, or a lot of business owners for sure, a lot of successful business owners, they like to travel. They like to explore the world. And whether they're, traveling for business or traveling for pleasure, they like to travel. So let's look at this also from a selfish perspective of our clients. We're talking to the business owners about travel insurance, and they, I think, it'll really resonate with them, and they'll recognize the value that you're providing. Want to talk a little bit about the benefits trust and where we're coming from, some of the horror stories that are out there. We want to talk about travel coverage, pre-travel responsibilities, travel responsibilities, plan member experience, opportunities, where to add value. And then, of course, we'll have some question and answer and discussion. And we're going to finish right at 11 o'clock sharp. But if you want to stick around for a few minutes afterwards, we'd be more than happy to have sort of an off-camera conversation, if you would. And we can talk about anything you want, including travel insurance. So, a little bit about the Benefits Trust. We started on January 1st, 1994. We're a full service third party administrator. A lot of you have heard this before because you've been on these calls. We're the largest independently owned TPA in Canada. In 2024 and 2025, we were named top employer in the benefits industry by our friends at the Benefit and Pension Monitor magazine. As well as that, in 2024, we were the top, or one of the top benefit providers. We provide custom employee benefit solutions. We've got exceptional client experience. That's the feedback that we've received from our clients. We did a formal survey to all of our clients, and that's the information that we received back. We've got long-term relationships with all the major Canadian insurance carriers and service suppliers. And our target market is you. Our target market is you. It's working with advisors like yourself, because we don't sell direct. We work with advisors like yourself with clients from 1 to 100 employees. And why we say 1 to 100 is because in Ontario alone, there are more than 440,000 businesses. And geez, that's just where the market is. Canada is made up of a whole bunch of small businesses. We deal with a number of clients that are over 100 employees, but really our target market is working with that smaller employee segment, if you would. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I was in this session with Joe Polish yesterday and some others, and some of the things, some of the notes that I got, but it's kind of interesting. One of the notes that I was talking or that I wrote down from the session yesterday is, again, ideas without execution are worthless. But if we look at the marketplace out there right now in 440,000 businesses, 3% of the population, 3% of that 440,000 are open to buy right now. They're looking for something. That's 3%, right? 7% are open to discussion. They're open, they may have a benefit plan, but they may be open to looking at alternatives. So 3% are interested right now, 7% are interested, so 10% are interested in maybe having a discussion. 30% are not even thinking about it. 30% aren't even thinking about benefits. They're not even thinking about you. They're not even thinking about anything to do with their benefit plan right now. And the other 60% are simply just not interested in even hearing from you. Right? So when we think about it, yeah, there's 440,000 businesses, and 10% of those are interested or looking to buy. So there's still a great deal of opportunity out there. But the interesting thing is the 30% that aren't even thinking about it. That's where we have to develop our message, and that's where you can add a lot of value and separate yourself from someone else. You got to get their attention. So there is still enormous opportunities here in the province of Ontario to sell insurance. I'm going to stop sharing right now. Jordan, if you could pull up this video, I just want to share a video when we were researching this subject. A video popped up that I think is very pertinent. So, Jordan, if you could share this video right now.
Absolutely. Can you see that, Rob, the screen there?
Yeah, I can see
Perfect.
it. Just can't hear it, but yeah. Oh, Jordan disappeared. Where'd it go? Share again, please. Yeah, thanks.
A BC woman is sharing her
Oh,
travel health insurance nightmare as a
Jordan, I
cautionary
can't see it.
tale to warn others. She ended up in a
Jordan, can't see it. All I'm seeing is your Zoom.
Can't see it? Okay.
Florida hospital and thought she was fully covered until she received a shocking hospital bill months later. With more on her story, let's bring in Consumer Matters reporter Ann Drua. Ann?
Thanks, Sophie. Roseanne Timbrell says she had extended health coverage through her work and felt confident traveling out of country, but Roseanne ended up in a Florida hospital where she received a life-changing diagnosis. But there was more shocking news. It turns out there was a clause in the fine print of her health insurance policy that proved costly. It was supposed to be a well-deserved vacation. Roseanne Timbrell and her husband heading to Walt Disney World in Florida to unwind and relax.
Walt Disney World is a great place just to hang out.
The trip was this past February, but just prior to leaving, Roseanne says she was experiencing flu-like symptoms.
I wasn't feeling the greatest before I went on vacation.
As a precaution before her trip, Roseanne says she consulted with her doctor about her symptoms and had a blood test, but says at the time there was no cause for alarm.
But I'm still able to go to work, so if I'm able to go to work, I think I'm able to go on this vacation.
Roseanne says she had extended health insurance coverage through her work and felt confident she was covered. But when she arrived in Florida, Roseanne says her symptoms were getting worse. Eventually, Roseanne decided to go to emergency. But before she did, Roseanne says she called her insurance provider to make certain her hospital visit would be covered.
The agent said, yes, you're covered, and you do have extended health for out of country. And I said, okay, because if not, I'm jumping on the next plane.
Roseanne arrived at the Florida hospital where she received shocking news. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
I guess it was traumatizing. It's not something you would ever think that would happen on vacation.
Roseanne spent 5 days in the Florida hospital undergoing further testing. When she returned home, her insurance provider denied her claim, stating the expenses incurred at travel were directly related to your unstable pre-existing condition. Within the fine print of her policy, there was a stability clause, which means a pre-existing medical condition must remain stable for 90 days prior to traveling. Roseanne was hit with a medical bill of $108,000 US.
Just absolutely shocking. I just wish I'd gotten on the plane and come home instead of dealing with all that in the States.
Travel expert Claire Newell says sadly Roseanne's claim denial isn't uncommon. Stability clauses are often written in standard medical insurance policies.
A lot of people still don't realize that there is a stability period. And in some policies, it's 3 months. In others, it can be as high as 6 months. And it's really important that you read the fine print.
A GoFundMe page has been set up by family and friends to help Roseanne. Still, Roseanne hopes her story helps others avoid the insurance nightmare she's still dealing with.
Understand your policy very, very, very clearly because you're having to be your own best advocate.
And we are told by Roseanne's insurance provider there is a resolution process to dispute her claim if she chooses. That process will allow her claim to be reviewed by a complaints investigator. Again, travel experts warn it's important to read the fine print of any policy, especially around the stability clause, and to ask questions. Also, make sure you request the actual policy. That's not a brochure. That's a full policy with full details of what is covered and what isn't. And if you have a consumer issue for me, you can email me at consumermatters@globalnews.ca.
All right, thanks for that, Ann.
Thanks, Jordan, for sharing that. It's an amazing video. And it was interesting. We were putting this together, putting this presentation together, and I think Rob was doing the research on it. And, just pulled up, did a search. Rob, tell us what happened.
I did a quick Google search, and this was the first one that popped up because it was the most recent, but you keep scrolling and there's countless videos just like this. And the common theme is didn't understand the fine print or was not told about the fine print. We were just told we have coverage and that's it.
Yeah.
Didn't
So it's
understand there's other
interesting.
intricacies and that type of thing.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Thanks, Rob. It's interesting, and thanks, Jordan, for sharing as well. But it's interesting. There are countless stories like this, and I've been a licensed insurance advisor since 1988, and I've heard thousands, or not thousands, I don't know, hundreds of stories like this. You can't turn on the news without seeing one of these stories almost once a week or once every couple of weeks. So this is where the opportunity arises. So not a problem; it's an opportunity. There are countless stories like this. The common theme is clients just unaware of the provisions and they assume that they have coverage. And as Rob mentioned, a lot of these stories are just blaming people for not reading the fine print. But this is where the opportunity is. It's our job as advisors to advise. And I think we've got to translate that fine print, if you would, into a language that our clients are going to understand. The executives are going to understand. The employees are going to understand. The families are going to understand. And the department is going to understand. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But it's important that we look at this. So, the travel insurance marketplace, where are we in the travel insurance marketplace? Well, there's many options. The majority or a lot of Canadians have a benefit plan and it's included in their benefit plan. So they think they've got travel insurance coverage. There's certainly a lot of online availability for someone to just sign up online and get a travel insurance company. We use a company called Medipack in Toronto. They're excellent. We've had great results with them. People think they've got credit card coverage. I've got an American Express Gold card. I've got a Visa Gold card. It comes with travel coverage. It's fantastic. Great, I'm covered. I don't need to worry about this. A very good friend of mine is a travel agent. She's a super high-end travel agent, and books people on safaris and all sorts of other exotic trips. And I was having a conversation with her one day, and she was telling me that her company requires her to sell travel insurance coverage, and she hates it because she's not licensed to do so and doesn't know the intricacies of the policy. And it's her concern it's going to come back and haunt her, right? The fact of the matter is, most of the time, it's misunderstood and confusing to clients and consumers. Travel insurance is misunderstood and confusing to clients and consumers, without a doubt. Mistakes can lead to huge liabilities, and again, frequent media horror stories. You're at risk as well as an advisor. And I'm not necessarily saying you're liable for that $108,000 bill that individual had, but you're at risk because of your reputation. You've all heard the expression, time is money. I don't think time is necessarily money. I think relationships are money. That's what I believe. Relationships are money. And you can have a fabulous relationship with a client that you might have had for years. And all of a sudden that goes south because of an out-of-country claim, because they didn't understand or somebody didn't understand the fine print, or it was never told to them what the intricacies of their policies, are all about. Our job as advisors is, I think, to properly educate our clients on how their benefit plan works, including, if it includes, the travel coverage, right? Why take a chance of messing up a relationship because, oh yeah, you're covered for travel insurance and that's it, right? I like to say travel insurance is like a car jack. Travel insurance is like a car jack. You have one. If you drive a car, there's probably a car jack in your car somewhere. You don't know where it is, but it's in there somewhere, right? You don't know how to use it. It's always inconvenient when you get a flat tire. And the funny thing is, I got a flat tire this week, and trust me, it's inconvenient. There's never a good time to get a flat tire, right? But the car jack, when it's used properly, it can save your butt. But if it's not used properly, it can lead to serious problems. Right? The car can fall off the car jack and can crush you or wreck your tire or your wheels and alignment and all sorts of things. But that's the way people look at car. That's the way that people look at travel insurance. Yeah, I got it. I don't know where it is or how to use it, but yeah, I got it. So I'm not really that worried about it. So when we think about travel, whether it's for business or personal reasons, planning a trip requires a lot of work. It's, there's things that are going into it. Michelle, my wife, and I are going on a trip at the end of this month, and we're going to spend 2 weeks in touring around different parts of Europe, and it's required a great deal of planning. And we've had to make airline reservations, hotel bookings, and we're doing a bit of a tour. So we're staying I think in 13 days, we're staying in 7 or 8 different hotels. Hotel transfers or car rentals. We're looking at doing some very specific excursions. We don't have to arrange for a pet sitter, but you've got to arrange for pet sitters. You got to put lights on timers. You got to cancel your Globe and Mail subscription or put it on hold. Whatever the situation is, you got to make sure, you don't order things on Amazon 2 days before you go so they're delivered and piled up in the front of your house, right? But I think we need to change people's attitude where reviewing travel insurance should be added to this planning, right? It could be the most costliest aspect of your trip if it's messed up, and it's often overlooked until it's too late. So it's interesting, all of a sudden you go through all these things and you make reservations and you've got these hotels and cars booked and so on and so forth and bought tickets for things and you might be going to a concert or a game or wherever you're going, right? And all of a sudden, oh geez, I don't have travel insurance and I can't get it. Uh-oh, there's a problem. Or I'm not covered under my work's travel insurance because of these reasons. I'm not stable or whatever the circumstances are. So I think as advisors, we need to stress that we need to put this on the list. We need to put travel insurance on the list, just like airline reservations and concert tickets. We need to put it on the list in the pre-planning stages of traveling. That notion, I have travel insurance through work, so I'm covered. Check. Are you sure? Look at that lady that was, on the global video from British Columbia. She thought she had travel insurance coverage. She called and they said, yeah, you got coverage. She did all the right things except to read her policy, right? She left when she wasn't feeling well. That's a big red flag, right? So are you sure? Travel is part of my job. It's, travel is part of my job. I travel for work, right? I'm going to be traveling out of the country. I'm going to be traveling out of the province. I'm, my company is sending me to this conference in Boston, right? What happens if you don't have travel insurance company or travel insurance coverage? Does that go back to the employer, right? We're saying, hey, geez, you told me that I have to go to this conference. You said you've got me travel insurance coverage through work. Uh-oh, now I'm all of a sudden sick in Boston. I have a $500,000 bill. Well, whose responsibility is it? Is it now because the insurance company denied coverage because of the details in it? Is it now the employer's responsibility? Right? It's a big fight. It's a big problem. So pre-travel responsibilities, you've got to review your travel coverage. Is your entire family covered? You got to review the stability period. You got to review the pre-existing condition clause. You got to call the insurer eligibility number, when applicable. I know we use Green Shield as a travel insurance company. We encourage people to call before they travel. Call before they travel just to confirm that they're covered, right? They've got a checklist of things that they go through and they answer questions and ask for information and they're going to maybe give you a little bit more of a peace of mind. The other thing you got to do is great. So now you're covered. Fantastic. But how do you make a collect call when you're out of the country? Different country codes. You got to know how to do this kind of stuff, right? It's things that we take for granted, but it's not necessarily that easy, especially when there's a lot of emotion built up into it. How do you make a collect call when you're out of the country? How do you, review when to call for assistance? What happens if the call drops? People think the insurance company's hanging up on them. Well, Mexico's got a really bad telecommunication system. So you might make a call there, and halfway through the call, all of a sudden the call drops. It's not the insurance company hanging up on you. They're not in that business of hanging up on you. They're in the business of providing great client service, right? So you've got to know how to use the phone when you're in another country, right? And how to continue to, use the phone when you're in another country. And understand the intricacies of just communicating back to Canada, for example, when there's a problem. The stability period. A stability clause sets rules for covering pre-existing conditions, right? In every single policy, there's a stability period. The stability period may be 30 days, it may be 90 days, and maybe 180 days. I know we've got a 30-day stability clause in our contracts, but there is, if you're over age 70, 70 to 80, 80 to 90, there's different stability clauses. They might be longer, but it's important to understand what those stability clauses are and what they mean. And I'm certainly not an expert in this field, but I like to, refer to the company. If you've got any questions about this, we encourage people to call before they travel. what does stability mean? And especially if they're under care or taking medications of any way, shape, of any kind, it's important that they call and understand this. Stability means medication and dosage. You've been using the same medications and the same doses consistently. I take Lipitor, or the generic equivalent of Lipitor, but I go to the doctor every single year and have blood tests, and my dosage hasn't changed, so I'm stable. There's no additional treatment. There's no additional treatment, and nothing's been scheduled, right? There's no pending medical investigations. These things, hey, that's great. We want you to take this blood test, and then, we want you to come in for further examinations. Okay, but I'm just going to go to Europe for 2 weeks. Well, you might not be covered, right? So it's important to understand the stability clause in your contract. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is I've looked at a couple of contracts, and the stability clause is not defined. It's not defined in black and white, right? As a number of days. They just say you've got to be stable. Well, what does stable mean? I'm 61 years old, but there's been a lot of changes since, I was born on my stability, if you define it. But the insurance company is not necessarily defining it in black and white, and that's a huge red flag to me. So what does stability mean? And it's important that we understand what stability means, but more importantly, we pass that off to the client so they can understand it and they can get the answers. The eligibility number. Most travel insurance businesses have some type of eligibility uh, um, opportunity, if you would, in their policies where you can call in advance and say, hey, great, am I stable? Am I covered? What am I covered for? What am I not covered for, etc. And if there's questions, you can answer the questions that they're going to ask you. But one of the things that we stress is, tell the truth. And it's as simple as that. You got to tell the truth. They can ask questions about, you can ask questions about eligibility. They're going to ask you some questions, give them the right answers, and they're going to be able to determine whether or not you are stable. These calls are often recorded, so it can be, and a file is opened about asking these questions. So it's being documented. So you're starting that process, right? You got a travel card and a booklet and a contract. Tell your clients to make multiple copies of the travel card and put them in different places with your passports, a little travel card in the back of your passport. Put them in different bags and have electronic copies and physical copies. Every one of our clients has that's downloaded our app, has their complete travel coverage, including all the numbers to call and the booklets and the card and the contract right on their app. We have different suitcases that Michelle and I use depending on if we're just traveling for a few days or a longer period of time. But in all of our suitcases, we've got physical copies of our travel insurance coverage. Tell your clients to distribute the cards to other members of their party, because if you can't call, it's important that someone calls on your behalf. And Michelle knows who to call, and I know who to call if Michelle's, God forbid, in trouble. And it's the sooner you get this process started, the better. So if you're incapacitated and someone doesn't know what to do that you're traveling with, right, it's important to tell them what to do in advance of the travel so we can get over this hurdle, so to speak. Trip duration is another one. And it's interesting about trip duration because you got to make sure that they're aware of their trip duration. So if a client has a 28-day trip planned for whatever reason, and they've got 30 days of travel coverage, it might not be enough. You got to plan for flight delays and weather cancellations and so on. You got to plan for the unplanned, the unexpected, because sometimes things happen, and they happen at the wrong time. So travel insurance coverage is something, excuse me, travel insurance is something that we got to plan for. You can't plan for, I've got 30 days of coverage. I got to be home on that 30th day. You might be on the other side of the world, and it might be difficult to get home on that 30th day because all of a sudden you're stuck in London on your way home or whatever the situation is. The other thing is, as travel insurance becomes more and more expensive, and it is becoming more and more expensive because more of us are traveling, which means more claims, which means higher premiums, right? So a lot of companies are saying, hold on a second, let's rethink travel insurance. Do we need to offer this as a benefit? And do we need to offer 60-day as a standard policy? Do we need to offer 60-day coverage? Well, we can offer 15-day coverage, or we can offer 30 or 60 or 90 or 120, 180. We've got a number of clients that have 10 people in their company. They got a 10-person group, and they've got 6 people that are covered for 15-day coverage, and they've got 2 people that are covered for 30-day coverage. And then the 2 owners of the company, for example, might be covered for 180-day coverage because they go to their house in Florida or Arizona when and they work from there for the winter. So you can customize the travel insurance coverage according to the needs of the company. The other thing is, a lot of people don't necessarily want a lot of clients don't necessarily want encourage their employees or senior employees to be taking, 3 or 4 weeks off consecutively. They may want to have them split it up. So use travel insurance, appropriately, but make sure that people are aware of the trip duration component of the contract. Plan member eligibility. One thing that's important to know is claims are adjudicated at the time of claim. Claims are adjudicated at the time of claim. It's as simple as that. The policy you must review the minimum eligibility requirements under the travel policy, the minimum hours worked. We've got to watch out for parents and children that are putting non-dependent children or non-dependent family members, as employees, so they've got coverage. We had an example, and this kept me up at night. I'll tell you that. This kept me up at night when this was going on. We had an employee that was traveling in the US, and she was in Miami, Florida, and she was pregnant. And she was well within the OHIP guidelines of traveling. But all of a sudden, it was, I think, New Year's Eve, and she went into early labor. And they rushed her to the hospital, and they realized that they couldn't slow down or stop this early labor. She was in it, there was no stopping it. So then they rushed her to a children's hospital in Miami. And at this particular hospital, they tried everything they could, but they couldn't stop and couldn't slow down the delivery. She had the delivery, or she delivered the baby. The baby was an extreme preemie. It was instantly in the ICU, instantly in intensive care. We learned about this very early in January. The claim was probably about 5 or 6 days old. We are already over $500,000 after 5 days, right? Incredible. It was just escalating every day. We got the insurance company involved. The mother of the daughter called me in a panic. That's how we got involved in this. And we informed the insurance company right away. The insurance company, put their people on it. And they were very aware of what was going on. But it was interesting because there were a number of concerns. The first concern was this particular individual had single coverage. So the travel coverage was on her. It wasn't on her newborn. So whether that was going to be covered or not was one challenge. And then the second challenge was all of a sudden they started doing investigations into this particular employee, and they realized after a period of time that she didn't meet the minimum hours worked. As a matter of fact, she didn't even work there. Make a long story short, she didn't even work there. Her mom just put her on as an employee, but she never worked there. She never had a desk at this particular company. She never had an email. Most of the employees didn't know who she was other than just the daughter of the owner. So it was interesting because we got a call one day from the head investigator at the insurance company, and who we were working with on this particular file, and they said this claim is going to be denied for this reason. She doesn't work there and doesn't meet the minimum required hours. They told her that she was denied, and the client was pretty upset about it, but understood it, thankfully, but was pretty upset about it. So it's important that we know that when you're signing someone up, that they are true employees of the business and they meet the minimum required hours. I remember very early on in my career, I was taking over a client, and the employee, like the owner of the company, his mother was there as an employee. And I said, that's not going to be a problem for the health and dental to a certain extent, for routine claims, but it's going to be a problem for out of country coverage. And we argued, and I was prepared to walk away from the case, but I argued with this gentleman about this particular situation. And finally he said, that's fine. We'll have to get her appropriate coverage, because I explained the liability that's associated with it. So it's important that plan member eligibility is taken into consideration. Canadian government travel advisories. This is important as well. There's a lot of things going on in this world and a lot of changes happen in this world. And you know what? If there's a level 4 advisory, avoid all travel, and then you're in that area or travel to that area, you may not be covered. You may not be covered for certain things because of where you are and what's going on in that particular part of the world. So we've got to look at eligibility. We've got to look at stability. We've got to look at time you're going to be away. We also have to look at the Canadian government advisories, whether it's safe to go to a particular spot or not, and whether you're going to be covered. And then all of a sudden, great. So now we've got all this, but what do we do what do we do during a travel emergency? Well, we've got to call the number as soon as possible, the 1-800 number as soon as possible. And this is important for a number of reasons. Number one, it sets up the claim. Number two, they're going to tell you, in our case, it's Can Assistance, they're going to tell you where the best treatment is for the particular ailment that you may have. They're going to send you to a center of excellence that's closest to where you are. And the other thing is the hospital is going to know that they are going to be paid because the insurance is already kicking in. And you might get, and I'm not saying this in all cases, but certainly in certain countries, you might get a lot better service and coverage or treatment because they know they're going to be paid and they're going to be paid well by a Canadian insurance company. So it's important to call that number or have somebody in your party call that number as soon as possible. The travel assistance role, and again, we use Can Assistance, they're available 24/7, toll free or collect. Again, we got to know how to make a telephone call from Germany or from a remote part of Africa. You got to know how to be able to make a telephone call from them, and that representative is going to open a file for you and direct you to the nearest clinic or hospital that offers the best available care. They're going to be coordinating with that particular hospital or clinic. They'll confirm whether your emergency is covered, and if possible, handle the payment directly so you don't have to pay up front. The hospital is going to know, or the clinic's going to know that they're going to be reimbursed. They're going to assess your condition and make plans for follow-up treatment if further care is required. They're going to fly you home. They're going to do all sorts of different things, and they're going to provide translation services if necessary. We had a client that was an insurance advisor, and their daughter was traveling in France with another family, and she had an accident and broke her hip, or broke her pelvis, pardon me. Jumped into a pool after one of the children she was looking after, and unfortunately broke her pelvis. Well, she ended up in the hospital, and the hospital was just French speaking, and the mother of this particular advisor was coming out of her mind, and rightfully so. And she was hopping on a plane and she was getting over to France as soon as she could. And then all of a sudden, there was a translation service available through the Can Assistance role. They spoke to the doctor through the translation services. They calmed Mama Bear down, and everything was taken care of. But it provides peace of mind, right? But it's important to know, again, how to collect from the countries that you're visiting, because that's most important as well. Save all the travel documents. This woman that we saw in that video, it was a few months later or a period of time later that she found out that she wasn't covered, right? But, you got to save all the travel documents to make it easy. Save airline tickets, hotel bills, and the more information, the better. Last March, Michelle, my wife, we were skiing in British Columbia, so not even outside of the country, but we were skiing in British Columbia, and she fell, unfortunately, and broke her leg. And we had to came down off the mountain and she, with the ski patroller's assistance, of course, but she had to be transferred from the ski patrol toboggan to the hospital in an ambulance because of the severity of her injury. And the hospital was only 750 meters away. And it was very close, but 750 meters away. But we got an ambulance bill. It was $850. We claimed it through the insurance. We claimed it through our out of country and out of province medical insurance. But we had to show proof of departure, and we had to find our airline tickets. Well, you know what? We didn't have the airline tickets, but we had to get them. And that was 2.5 hours on hold with Air Canada. 2.5 hours. We looked, couldn't find them on our electronic copies. But anyways, save all of your stuff. Put them in a file, an electronic file, and put them away until you know that there aren't any issues. Right? the member plan experience can be smooth, it can be bumpy. If the client is prepared, it can be a lot smoother than if the client is not prepared. It's as simple as that. Our job is to advise people on how to use their travel insurance, or what their travel insurance is, what it means, what the fine print is, and then how to use it should they need to. It's easy. How many people are going to go to the dentist in the next 12 months? Well, probably everybody's going to put up their hand. We make it easy for people to claim. You can snap a picture of it. It's going to be direct billed right from the dentist's office. You're going to use your drug card. We make it easy to use these transactional claims. When this comes up, an out-of-country travel claim comes up, it can be catastrophic. It can be incredibly catastrophic, and it's emotional. It's very emotional. So we got to teach people on how to use the services when they need the services, because it's an emergency. And as I mentioned, it can be incredibly emotional. Like, I was pretty emotional when my wife hurt herself. You don't want to see your partner or your spouse, or in this case, my wife, you know, injured. You don't want to see that. I was concerned, incredibly concerned for her well-being. Situations can be very complex, especially if you've got language issues, you're in another country, you don't know where they're going, where you're taking them. It can be very complex. There can be significant costs, like that lady I was telling you about that had the premature baby in Miami. I think the claim, when it was denied, it was still ongoing, but it was well over $750,000. Huge costs. This, as an advisor, this can come back and haunt you. It can take, more importantly than it can haunt you, it can take hours and hours of your time, and it can be very difficult to navigate because you're not the patient, you're just an advisor. So they're going, call the insurance company for me. And you're calling the insurance company. They go, we can't do anything because you're not the patient. You're just the advisor. Yeah, we need more information. Great. Your ability is being questioned as the advisor. You never tell me about this. You don't know what you're doing. Why? I wouldn't have gone if I had known this. All these types of things. So our job as the advisor, again, is to create value. And this is where the opportunity arises. We can create huge value to our clients, enormous value to our clients. If you over communicate and explain how the coverage works, you can save a lot of time in the long run. More importantly than that, you can save relationships in the long run. That's the critical part, is relationships. You can save the relationship with the client if an issue comes up. If there's an issue with a claim due to the fine print, the first person that they're going to be calling for and asking questions is you. You're the advisor. You're their point of contact. They're not going to call 1-800. They're going to call you and say, what's going on in this case? I just heard from an employee and they're stuck in Tennessee, or they're stuck in Germany, or wherever they are, right? And what's going on? And you're going, hey, geez, I don't know. It's in the policy. Let me look, right? Like, you can't be caught flat-footed. It's as simple as that. It's about being proactive instead of reactive. And this is where I think we as advisors can provide an enormous amount of opportunity. Take an active role. Take an active role. Advise, to print, send multiple copies of travel coverage, cards, details, share them with your travel party. Teach people how to use their travel coverage. And you can do this through lunch and learns. Like, it's easy. Hey, we're going to have a lunch and learn. We're going to do this twice a year. We're going to do this, just before the summer starts, when a lot of people travel. And we're going to do it right around this time of the year, Thanksgiving, because you know what? A lot of people are starting to travel for the winter, the fall, the winter, whatever it is. Create videos, 90-second videos. I've got 3-minute videos here, 90-second videos. Pre-travel, you can create 3 videos, simple. Pre-travel, what to do in case of an emergency while you're traveling, and then the claim process, claim expectations. The pre-travel, hey, it's Rob here. I'm your benefit advisor. Just want to make sure that you've got, your pre-travel checklist in place. Ensure clients are prepared. Again, about being proactive. Email clients travel information with instructions. Create. I love this. Create a pre-travel insurance checklist. A pre-travel insurance checklist. Right? You can brand it. You can put your name on it. It's something that you can provide to your clients to say to them, hey, this is fantastic. This is what people should do when they're looking at traveling. Over communication works. right? Set up your clients for travel success. Set up yourself for travel success. Communicate seasonally, as I mentioned. But this is fantastic because the HR department can use this as part of the new onboarding strategy for employees, for new employees. Great. Watch these videos on how to use the travel coverage. It just adds value, right? It's an onboarding process. Make it part of the onboarding process. You can send this out, especially for businesses where they've got people that are traveling for work. That's part of their job responsibilities. They are traveling for work. Well, I know a lot of people, not so many anymore, but people that travel for work, they're constantly on an airplane. They're constantly in the US. They're constantly in Europe. They're the ones that brag at parties that they've got, 2 million Aeroplan points or whatever the number is, right? But their job requires them to travel. But are they aware of their stability period? Is the employer aware of the stability period? Is the employer making the employee aware of the stability period? Right? This could be a quarterly reminder to the traveling crew of a company. All of a sudden, and I don't know the answer to this question, but is this something that you want you want to advise your clients that they get their employees to sign off on before they travel, especially if they're traveling for a work event? I know I'm not sure if Lawrence is still here. I can't see him on the screen, but Lawrence, you deal with a lot of lawyers, and sometimes these lawyers have to go to different conferences and different client meetings. I wonder what would happen if they were not aware of the stability clause and then ran into an incident while they were traveling somewhere outside of the province of Ontario, and all of a sudden had a huge bill. What would happen? Would it be the firm's responsibility, or would it be the individual's responsibility? I don't know. But if anybody can weigh in on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But it's about just making sure that people are aware, without a doubt. But use this as a prospecting tool. This is as I mentioned off the top, 3% of people are interested in buying now, and 7% are open to buying. There's 10% of the population that gives you an opportunity to separate yourself from other. Develop a communication strategy for your clients, and you can also use this while prospecting. Show them, the prospect, you know, create a branded checklist, guest, videos, brand new videos. Here's your pre-travel video. Here's, it's 90 seconds long. Here's your other, what happens in case of an emergency video, and then the claim expectation video, right? Set it up in newsletters, employee travel tips. You can do all of these types of things, and you can brand them to your brand and share them with prospects. Hey, Mr. Prospect, I know you're going to be or Mr. Prospect, you may be traveling in the next little while. I just had a lot of clients really get a great deal of value out of this. Do you have 10 minutes that I can share some information with you? I want to show you some things about how we can make, your benefit plan better through your travel coverage. Something along those lines. Like, it's getting in front of people and showing them what you're doing and how you're adding value, and how you're going to help them protect themselves from these intricacies of the travel coverage. Right. So it's something that you can do and use as a powerful, powerful, powerful prospecting tool. It's one that's often overlooked. So why don't you look at it and use it as this fabulous prospecting tool? Separate yourselves from the others. People go, oh yeah, travel insurance is covered. Am I covered for travel insurance? Yeah, it's included in your benefit plan. That's what I've heard people say. Excellent. Explain the risks associated with travel insurance and show how to educate your clients about said risks. Do an easy to do, and it's very thought provoking. Why didn't my advisor tell me this? When we're talking to prospects, why didn't my advisor tell me about this? I am assumed, well, we were all covered while traveling, regardless of what my health situation was like. Really? This is an opportunity for you to separate yourself from others. Travel insurance is a simple, easy way to do that, right? And it works. It truly does work. Remember, just because this is the most important thing, just because you have travel insurance coverage doesn't mean that you're covered. Just because you have it doesn't mean that you're covered. One thing I forgot to mention in one of the earlier slides, and it just sort of popped into my head, and I want to mention it as well, is if you've got clients, and again, this is part of the education process. If you've got clients where their children are attending school in the US for example, or in Europe or anywhere for that matter, they're traveling outside of the country to attend school, you've got to get a special, you got to get authorization from your travel insurance coverage that they are going to be covered because they may be more than the 60 days or 30 days or whatever the coverage is. They'll give it to you, but they've got to be informed. You've got to get a extension on the OHIP potentially, as well as that you've got to get a letter from the insurance company saying that yes, this student is going to be covered while they're traveling. The other thing that's interesting about travel insurance.
Rob, sorry,
Hello.
Rob.
Yeah.
One
Hi,
more
Lawrence.
thing, which is, hi. We'll go back to the lawyers in a minute if you want. But one more thing is when students go off to the U.S., most U.S. colleges and universities require that they
Yes.
have out-of-country coverage for the U.S. And
Yep.
it really has to be applied for before they leave Canada.
Yep. Very much so. And Lawrence, if you could share some thoughts of, hey, I'm a lawyer and I've been told to go to this conference and I didn't look at my insurance clause and my company has sent me there. What are some of the ramifications of that?
Well, I mean, firstly, I operate on the Kurt Cobain principle. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they ain't after you. And so it's always best to tell people that the best coverage is coverage that you obtain individually.
Yeah.
You obtain it from a travel insurance specialist. I refer to a specialist company. I don't do it myself because I don't know enough and because I'd rather lay off the liability to someone else. In terms of stability, nobody really understands what stability is, including often the travel insurance agents themselves. And so, for example, what if your medication is changed and now instead of it being a half grain where you have to split a 1 grain tablet, you actually get a half grain tablet? Is that a change in medication? Is
Yes.
that stability? Best thing to do is to advise the insurer and say, here's what's happened. When in doubt, take care, check it out. And that's my advice to my clients as well. We record every call. We tell people to always check that before they go, even with an annual policy, make sure that the stability clause is enforced. So say, I had a cold last week. I think I've recovered. Tell the travel insurance company, let them say you're covered.
Yep. Yeah, and it's about being aware. And Lawrence, you brought up a great point about buying individual travel insurance coverage because there's significantly more underwriting than just, hey, you're a full-time employee, so here's some travel insurance coverage, right? There's more underwriting involved. You're underwriting more or less at the time of application as opposed to the time of claim. And as a result of that, you've got a significant amount of peace of mind. We certainly recommend that for people that are uh, older in age, without a doubt. But we also recommend it, for people that are bringing up this concern about the fine print and the stability clauses and the pre-existing condition clauses in their policy. We say that's great. If you're really that concerned about it, we can't tell you because we can't tell you until there's a claim whether you're covered or not, quite frankly. And if you're really that concerned about it, buy individual coverage.
And what if you get a cold on the way to the airport?
Yeah.
Was that a pre-existing condition, or the flu, or COVID in the cab, or in the limousine, or in the bus?
Yeah.
Again, it's always best to lay off the risk. And with respect to the only the adjudicator knowing, well, when you have the person from the company recorded as saying you're covered, often the adjudicator will defer to that.
Yeah. We don't live in a perfect world, but what we can do is make the world better. Right? We don't live in a perfect world, but what we can do is make it better. And I think just by informing your clients, you're informing your clients about some of these concerns, you've got the opportunity to manage the relationship better. And that's what the idea behind this whole presentation is there's a lot of opportunities to get your hooks in this and certainly manage this opportunity better so you can strengthen the relationships you have with existing clients and potential prospects as well. So we got a few minutes left. That's the end of the presentation. We got a few minutes left. Anybody else have any other thoughts, ideas, and so on? Stacy, I know you're very active and you blog and you post about this stuff on LinkedIn. What are your thoughts and ideas and any tricks of the trade you'd like to share?
Yeah, people. So I just shared it with my book club. I'm part of a book club, and I would start talking about it. And the one woman says, "Well, I if I didn't know, then how can they not cover me? I says, well, it's because you have to know. So when you go start sharing this, they're going to argue with you because it's like, well, you got to tell them it's a contract, and I think I share it everywhere. Like I said, it's at a book club. I was at a friend's house at a barbecue a few weeks ago. I started talking about it. I think we need to all talk about it in a greater capacity because nobody knows or understands what's in their policies and nobody reads them. So that's what I have to say is we all have to share it all the time.
Here's a question to everybody. Here's a question to everybody. I was talking to my neighbor a couple of days ago, and he had a medical problem, and he spent 4 days in the ICU, and he had an infection somewhere close to his heart, and I don't know exactly what the story was, but he spent 4 days in the ICU, and he's continuing to go to further tests. And he goes, I've got the month of November, I'm going to see about 3 or 4 different specialists. So he's got all of these tests that are coming up to see if there's any damage caused by this infection and what's going to happen. So he's under some pretty significant medical care, and this has to do with his heart, and he's the same age as me. Anyway, so we're chatting about that, and I'm so that's too bad. Well, at least you're under care, and that's great. And then he goes, "Yeah, we're gonna go. We can't really go too far right now, but we just want to get away for a few days." And so my wife and I, we're gonna go and drive, and we're gonna drive down into Vermont just to see the colors of the trees and the mountains and so on. We're gonna drive into Vermont and tour around Vermont for a couple of days, and then drive back. Nice, easy trip, just because we want to get away. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh my gosh." You don't have any insurance coverage, buddy, right? Like you're crazy. So, do you think that's even though I'm not his advisor, but I'm an advisor, do you think that we should mention something in these situations? Because I'm sure we've all been in these situations. What are your thoughts, Lawrence?
Advise them to talk to their agent.
Yeah,
Also, be conscious of medical tourism. You
yeah,
are you are not stable if you're a medical tourist. It's simple.
yeah. And it does, even if you're going for hair transplants in Turkey, right?
Go to Turkey at your own risk right now.
But it's Lawrence, I think you just brought up some great advice. You can say it in a very delicate way. You can say, hey, you know what? I don't know an awful lot about travel insurance, but it's something that we include. But one thing I do know is I think you should check with your advisor on that. So you're not giving him advice necessarily in this case, just as Lawrence said, but you're saying, hey, you can sleep at night because you've told him to talk to his advisor, right? James.
Yeah, Robert, everybody. Just a quick comment. I think it's one thing to say to check with your advisor, but it's more importantly to check with your contract.
Yeah.
Obviously, due diligence, recognizing there's some limitations in your ability to translate it, but hopefully you'll be able to cite enough questions to ask those who are to have that expertise that you can get the answers you need to feel confident. It's never a perfect world, as you said. In other words, in the event of this type of medical event that occurs, you need intervention that the bell curve's been skewed to give you the greatest outcome of being paid versus out of your resources.
Yep. It's a great point. Check with the advisor, check with the contract, read the contract. And again, sometimes it's incredibly difficult. Try to go on to, I encourage everybody to go on to Visa's website and try to get a copy of the out-of-country coverage. It's impossible. It's difficult to find. I don't want to say impossible. It's difficult to find, and it depends on the type of card you have and where you're trying. Anyways, and then read the fine print on that. It's mind blasting. We spent an hour.
Can I just make one other quick comment? Is one of the things I do is I'll take the contract of this nature or other types of contracts and put it into Notebook LM, which is a form of AI. The AI will give you a briefing document and will actually allow you to interact with that particular information and can assist you in asking it questions. Now, like anything, you have to worry about hallucinations and things of that nature. But in terms of getting better informed, it would be very helpful if you did that type of work, I think.
And James, great idea. Thank you very much for sharing that. And that's, again, what the whole idea of these things are, is to share ideas and share thoughts. But again, I see this as an enormous opportunity to separate yourselves from other advisors that are in the marketplace, to create value, to your clients and to your prospects. And you're going to help people at a time potentially when they need the help the most because you've helped them in advance so they know what to do. So we spent an hour together. Thank you very much. Mike Ignatz is going to send you a CE credit for participating. As well as that, you're going to be signed up for our Trusted Advisor newsletter. You're going to get a real short survey. Tell us how we did today, more importantly, how we can do it better tomorrow. In addition to that, as well, you are going to, uh, or we encourage you to visit us at our website. We're going to reach out to you to see how we can help you with your clients. As well as that, we want you to attend our other sessions. We've got an upcoming chat TBT session coming up, and we also have future Zoomcasts in the month of November and the month of December. So we're excited about that. It's a long weekend. The Jays won, the Leafs won. It's turkey time, and we encourage everybody to continue good selling to your clients and your prospects. And we also want to wish everybody a safe and happy holiday weekend. Thanks so much for attending.